Welcome to our first and I hope only ever, although I doubt that'll be the case, application or presentation for students who are applying to health profession schools over the next year. We sometimes refer to these as jam sessions for juniors applying in May, although some of you are not juniors and most of you won't actually apply in May, but you hopefully will be working on that process. If you don't already know me, I'm Dr. Johan, and I am the director of the Health Professions Advisory Group. You can see on the slide here, there is my email address. And if you have any questions, I encourage you to email me at johan@roanoke.edu. So we're all various places and we're watching things online. And COVID-19 is the reason for this. As you might imagine, COVID-19 is not only affecting us, and things are constantly evolving. So I'm sure you have lots of questions about your applications, and you also have lots of questions still probably about how the rest of the semester at Roanoke is going to play out for you. Things aren't any different anyplace else. So what I have here are a series of different links to various organizations, depending on which health profession school you are applying to. Now, I didn't recognize everybody's name on the list of people who were going to apply or were going to attend the in-person jam session. So I don't know what everyone's direction is, but I've captured many of the health profession schools here. If you don't see yours represented, please send me an email, or actually, please see if you can find specific information for that sort of thing, or for what the updates are for your particular type of or particular field. And if you can't find that information, send me an email and I'll see if I have any information or if I can help you out with that. So for example, I'm going to talk about medical school here. If you look here for medical school and for all the schools, you take a big scary test. For medical school, it's the MCAT, and you can see there is a link here. It's in purple because I tested it earlier for what's going on with the MCAT right now. By the time you have received this, I'm actually going to look at my calendar here. It is the 22nd, the March 27th, and April. I'm not sure. There's a first MCAT in April that canceled at this point. And there's information at that link on how to reschedule your MCAT exam. For medical school, there are two different application services, one for MD, and that's AAMC, and one for DO, and that's the OCOMAS one on the bottom. And you can follow those links to see what the updates are for those two application systems. Also, what I want to note here is that you notice that a lot of these systems say liaison next to them. OCOMAS, so DO schools and dental schools and PA schools and PT schools and OT schools all use this system called liaison. So when you click through those links, even though there are different ones, anything that says liaison next to it is going to bring you to a common page that will talk about updates. So some of you may have seen the video that was done by the president and the vice president at Roanoke College, where the vice president and the dean talked about various things that might happen going forward. And you might have heard him talk about some proposals that were going out to faculty about taking classes pass-fail for this term, or giving people the option, actually, is what he talked about, of taking a class for pass-fail. While that might seem very attractive to you, I've looked at a number of different sources out there, and I'd say the consensus, but there's really no detractors to this point of view. What you really should do is, if you get to choose between a letter grade and pass-fail, you should choose the letter grade. And here's the reasoning that people are talking about there. Many health profession schools have an online component, so we've gone online here. This isn't the last time you'll see online, and you want to be able to do that sort of thing. This is good practice, essentially. Secondly, a career in healthcare can be stressful at times, and you're going to need to be able to work under pressure and under unusual circumstances, just like this semester. And what I would say is you don't want to be in an interview with a physician, we'll take the physician point of view, who they ran out of masks and they ran out of gloves and they ran out of emergency beds, and they had to start deciding who got ventilators and who didn't, and tell them that, you know, it was just too stressful this semester with all the changes, and that you decided you had to go pass fail. I think that's not, the people that are interviewing you are going to be feeling the stress you're feeling right now, but more so because lots of lives are going to be at stake. Finally, what I'd like to encourage you to do is this is a difficult situation. I don't want to undermine how difficult this is and how we're really having to roll with this, and that you've been asked to do things that are not what you expected to do. You didn't sign up for this, right? But what I'd like you to do is try to reframe the difficult situation. And let's think about it as an opportunity to stand out from the crowd. So one way to do that is if a bunch of other people choose pass fail, it's to choose the letter grade. But I can tell you that as far as I can tell, all the health professions advisors out there at all the schools are recommending for their students that they choose the grade. So let's start talking about your application. What I'm talking about here, or what's on the slide, is going to be specific to applying to medical school, but it's applicable to multiple other fields as well. So we'll talk about that. First off are your grades. So hopefully to this point you've been maintaining a good GPA. What you want to be doing is earning A's and B's, about an equal amount of A's and B's, and the more A's, the better. This GPA of 3.5 or higher is for medical schools. You want to hit that line or higher. If you're slightly below it, that doesn't mean that you don't apply, but it may mean that you have one or more gap years before you get in. Then you have your big scary test. For med school, that is going to be the MCAT, but for other professions, if you're looking at pharmacy, it's the PCAT. For dentistry, it's the DAT. You should talk to your profession-specific advisor about that. And if you don't know who that is, I hope you do and you've been communicating with them. But if you don't know who that is, I have a list of them with their email at the end of this presentation. You have some sort of medical experience. So this varies as well from profession to profession, but that's going to take something it's going to be something about shadowing and volunteering or scribing or EMT. The other part you would have is you may have research experience. Of the 7 pieces up here, that research experience is the least essential. It depends if we're talking about medical schools. Each one is different. And that research can vary anywhere from just as important as all the other things on here to not very important at all. You have recommendations as well. So at this point, hopefully you have identified people to do your recommendations. You'll have a personal statement that you will write. So that will be something, I'll talk about that in a minute, but that's something that's going to describe you and make you stand out. And then finally, there is an interview. That assuming that these other things get you in, you have an interview, then that interview is very important. So here's a timeline for when the various things we talked about on the previous slide would happen or when you would be working on them. This timeline is specific for medical school, and generally you have the same sorts of things in all these application programs, but they may be earlier or later. If you are a PA, if planning on applying to PA, this actually moves up earlier. If for most of the other professions, this will move later, but you have the same sorts of things going on. So what you're doing, hopefully, is what we were doing before you went home was you were working on your medical experience, and you'd be working on your research, and you'd be identifying recommenders. Hopefully you have a good idea who those people are that are going to give you recommendations right now. And then also right now, you're hopefully studying for the entrance exam, so whatever big scary test it is that you're going to take. Once again, you want to take that really seriously. You are also, you should be thinking about drafting your personal statement. That personal statement is as important as your grades and as the MCAT or whatever big scary test you're going to take. So you should not short that. You should spend a bunch of time on that. We'll talk more about what goes into all of these things a little bit later. What we're going to do then is you will draft that personal statement and then you will do a mock interview with HealthPAG. We're planning on doing that by Zoom. So you will Zoom in and there'll be 2 faculty members who will Zoom in. They might be in the same room. They might not be in the same room. If they're in the same room, we'll be maintaining 6-foot distance from each other. And once you do that interview, you're going to start revising and polishing your personal statement based on the feedback we're giving you, and also feedback you might get from someone else. You should be thinking about right now, we're getting close to April, asking recommenders to write letters. The earlier the better on that, so they can start thinking about what they might do. Particularly for those of you that have active health professionals, and most of you need a recommendation from an active health professional, they might get really busy real soon here. And if you ask them earlier rather than later, they may be able to get your letter done. You will then, in May, hopefully early May, you will take whatever your big scary test is, May or early May, late May, but you want to have those results back, say, by mid-June. So that's when you would plan to take the test, in this case for medical school, that would be the MCAT. And then you want to work hard on your application through till about June and be ready to apply to schools. So you could apply as early as June 1st, and then the AMCAS system, if we're talking about med school, they work through it and those become available to schools on July 1st. You should not be looking to apply any later than July 1st if you're applying to medical school. So you have some big scary test you take. This thing is as important as your grades. And it's as important as your experiences. It's as important as everything else. So you should take it very seriously. You should study hard for this test. You should try to make that first taking of that test really good. If you are not already taking some sort of class, you could take a Kaplan prep course. We have grants for those, and we may have money left in those grants. I haven't checked that recently, but if you're interested in taking a Kaplan course and they're done online, let me know, and I can see if we have grant money left for that. Also, some people study on their own, and there are books in the library. Library isn't as available as it used to be, but you can go ahead and order books. We've had people take the Kaplan prep course. We've had people study on their own. I have not noticed any real difference in terms of performance there. I think what people do is they pick the sort of thing that fits them best, what kind of studying fits them best, and they go with that. That's what I recommend. Next, we have recommendations. So there are several different recommendations you want. You want a letter from a professional in the field you are pursuing. So if you're a PA, you're applying for PA, you want a recommendation from a PA. If you are pursuing PT, you want a recommendation from a PT. If you're pre-med, there are actually 2 different types of schools that you can and probably should apply to. There are MD schools and DO schools. And many of those MD schools want to see a letter from an MD, and many of the DO schools want to see a letter from a DO. So you should think about whether you have experiences or whether you can ask an MD and a DO for recommendations. If all you have is an MD or all you have is one of those, that's what you can go forward with. Often with DO schools, what I've seen is people will apply with an MD only recommendation, and then they need to go get some experience, and if they're accepted, then they need to go out afterwards and get some experience and get a recommendation from a DO after acceptance. HealthPAG, it will write you a committee letter. So we will do our mock interviews shortly, actually. In the next few weeks, we will do our mock interviews with you. And for those interviews, out of those interviews, we will set up a mentor with you. I think I say this in a later slide. They will work with your personal statements. They will also draft a committee letter that will then go to the whole committee and everyone will comment on it, and we all work to it to make the best letter we can for you. If you would like you probably want a letter from a science faculty member. Medical schools like to see that. And you could also add a letter from your volunteer experience, or the next point, a letter from someone who can highlight a unique strength. So maybe it's not a medical sort of experience, but if you have something where you were a great leader, that's a good thing that can go into one of these things. If somebody's seen you do something really awesome and it didn't happen to be medically related, that's okay. Generally, we're looking for about 4 to 6 letters total. It might be that you can actually bring to bear 12 letters, but medical schools and these other schools have a lot of applications to read and they don't want 12 letters. So think about 4 to 6 letters total there, where that HealthPAG committee letter is part of that. So interview. In prepping for the interview, you should certainly prep for this as well. You can obtain a list of interview questions from the internet. I particularly like this set of questions that's linked in the presentation here from MIT. And it's not that MIT has a med school, but they have students they send to med school, and these are the questions they like to share with those students. I just recommend you download that, and if you haven't done it already, you download it and you look them over. See what people are asking and think about your medical experiences or various experiences in your life and how you would tell a story to answer those questions. We are going to conduct a mock interview with you before the end of the semester. We'll use Zoom for the interviews, and you must submit a draft of your personal statement before we will do a mock interview with you. That personal statement needs to be emailed to Ms. Duncan. And also in the next point, you'll want to email Ms. Duncan to pick out one of the interview dates that's listed below. Personal statements. You need to write a personal statement, like I said, or a draft of your personal statement before we do your mock interview. What should go into your personal statement? Well, first off, you should look at the prompt that is given that you were given from whatever particular field you're applying to. So if you're applying for PAs have a different prompt than med schools have. Then if you're going to optometry school, they have a very specific prompt. So you want to look at what those prompts are and make sure that your personal statement addresses them. We have this book called Write for Success. I'll show you a picture of it later. They're on reserve in the library under HealthPAG. Now, I realize that we're all over the place now, and you may not be able to go to the library to get a copy of this. So if you're not local, please email me, and what I will do is I'm going to purchase a series of these, and I will send out copies. I don't know how quickly the turnaround is going to be on that. So we're looking at doing your interviews. I think it's not next week, but the week after that, we're going to do your interviews, and you may need to put together your draft of that personal statement before you've seen this book. And that's okay. In terms of the mock interviews, we're not expecting a draft personal statement or a perfect personal statement. A draft is okay, but we want a complete draft. So what sorts of things do you want to address? I've got two things here that I've highlighted in blue. And there are two things that every personal statement should contain. It should contain a statement about why you want to be a blank. So why do you want to be a physician? And they also need to demonstrate a commitment to serve others. So the reason why these schools want you to do all this shadowing experience is they want you to know the good, the bad, the ugly of being I'm going to use physician again, being a physician. And they don't want you to get to their school, be there for a year, rack up a ton of debt, and then decide that, no, that wasn't really for you. That's really kind of a disaster for everyone involved. So you need to convince them that I want to be a physician and I know what a physician does. I know what I'm getting into. So let's talk about that particular piece because it's very important. So everybody wants to help people. You don't want your answer to be, I want to help people and I'm good at science. The interview committees see too much of that. You want to think about why do you want to help people and why do you want to help people as a physician? Because there are lots of ways to help people. Think about what's specific about if you're talking about helping people or you're really going to be telling a story here. What does that story say? How does that story explain that you really want to help people as a physician? And that's the real way you need, that's the real calling for you in terms of helping people. Another thing that happens in a lot of these is they're inspired by a personal family or family or personal illness. Um, and someone was treated, you had some sort of disease and a physician helped you and that inspired you to become one. And that's great. You shouldn't neglect putting that in the essay, but that can't be the whole essay. It can't be the whole part of why you want to be a physician. What those sorts of stories need is you tell that story. So the story is I was helped by physicians, or a family member was helped by physicians, and I want to become one. And that's what sparked your interest. And then you need to tell some stories about how you investigated what it's like to be a physician afterwards, and how that's just reinforced your desire to become one. The second thing that you need, besides demonstrating that you know what you're getting into, is you want to demonstrate a commitment to serve others. Healthcare is hard, and it can be really emotionally draining is not the right word here, but it can be really emotionally punishing, I think is the word from the stories that I hear. And you need that commitment to serve others to make it through. You're just not going to make it through the hard times unless you really have a deep ingrained reason to be there. And so they're looking for people that have a commitment to serve others. And you demonstrate that through stories about your volunteer experience. So think about some good stories from your volunteer experience and how they show your commitment to serve others. I've got some other points here. You also want to show a passion for healthcare. You want to share events that show you have compassion, resiliency, courage. Essentially, outside of it, you've got those two items that are in blue. And then you have personal strengths, and you have personal strengths that set you apart from other people. What are those? Pick a couple of those and tell some stories about those. You could also talk about influential people in your life and why. And if you talk about their values, if they're influential and you value their values, that's helpful in getting a committee to understand who you are, getting them to know you better. You could also talk about pivotal moments in your life and why were those things pivotal for you. So here's what this Write for Success book looks like. It doesn't show the thickness in terms of this picture, but it's a very thin book. And what this book is it has a few pages on what should go into your personal statement, what's important for or what committees want to see. And then what it does is it goes through a whole bunch of different example personal statements. It'll give you 3 really very good personal statements. And then it gives a whole bunch of flawed personal statements. And they get evaluated by admissions personnel at various schools have written comments about those. And so it's really good to see what kind of things are out there. Don't be thrown off in terms of those. I think this is actually useful to see it. When you look at those examples that are flawed, what you're going to see as well is that all people at all medical schools view things differently. All right, so you're going to write one personal statement for a whole bunch of schools, and different people are going to see it in different ways. And you need to think about that or try to accommodate that as much as possible. All right, social media. This is where I get to be the old man on the lawn, or the old man on his front porch telling people to get off his lawn, right? This actually really does matter. I didn't used to think, or I didn't used to pay attention to this and think it mattered, but I've actually talked with directors of admission at various schools and heard them come up with specific stories of where this has mattered for students. So admissions personnel at medical schools are really risk adverse, and they will look at your social media presence and see if there's anything they need to be worried about. I've seen this hurt students in the past. I've also seen it help students in the past. I've gotten feedback from a director of admission on a student who had some really rough stuff going on in her life that she had done really well with in terms of showing resilience. And I called that director to talk about, hey, you should look at this student. Here's some amazing stuff I've seen. And that director had already seen it, knew all about it because she had been on that student's Facebook page. So you should think about your social media presence, and you should clean it up if that needs doing. So this spring, what we want you to do is be working with us in terms as much as possible in terms of getting things in for your applications. We have a bunch of planned work right here. So after reading your personal statement, interviewing you, we will prepare a committee letter that'll be part of your application to professional school. We'll assign you at that interview a personal statement mentor. So we're going to have a draft of your personal statement. We'll assign you with a faculty member, and you should pass that personal statement back and forth multiple times. We have lots of experience helping students get into professional schools. And we also know the directors out there and the other admissions staff. We know what they like to hear. We know what they're looking for, so we can help you present yourself in the best light. Once you have put together a draft of your personal statement, you do need to, and this is just a reminder because that you need to get that into Ms. Duncan at least one day prior to that interview. If you have not gotten Ms. Duncan a draft of your personal statement one day prior to your interview, we will cancel the interview. We want you to be prepared for that interview, and the personal statement helps you to think about the sorts of things that we're going to ask questions about. Finally, we would like outside the personal statement for you to think about your HealthPAG interview. So earlier there was a link to some good questions. You could also find your own questions on the internet for what might be helpful. Think about those questions. What I like to do when I have this sort of interview, and I've had a few of these in my life, is I like to look through the questions and write a short paragraph story that's from my personal experience. Practice speaking about those experiences and practice telling stories. This doesn't have to be a script. You don't have to have it completely memorized, but you want to have kind of gone over them so that they come to mind quickly. You should dress appropriately for your interview. So certainly for your real interviews, you're going to want to dress fully appropriately. For this Zoom stuff, you could wear pajama bottoms and fuzzy bunny slippers, but why don't you go ahead and dress appropriately for the Zoom part of the interview. Finally, be on time for your interview. That's always good practice. All right, and so finally, what I want to do is encourage you to stay in touch. One of your greatest advantages over schools or other students at other colleges is the real personal attention you get from Roanoke faculty. You're used to that, but that doesn't happen everywhere. And so you should take advantage of that. We really want to help you get where you want to go. And so, and we really enjoy doing that. So please take advantage of it. Don't get lost. And that's going to be easy. It's going to be easier to get lost with everybody online. So be proactive. Don't lose that advantage. What I've done here then is I've listed the HealthPAG advisors below for the various fields. What I'd encourage you to do is if you have questions to contact, you can certainly contact me, but if you're headed towards a profession that isn't pre-med or pre-PA, or isn't medicine or PA, I'd encourage you to also contact the specific advisor listed below. And then finally, I have Ms. Duncan's information down there. You're going to need to send her a personal statement, and please make sure you do that at least one day before your interview. So I'll close with that. I hope that all of you are staying healthy and that things are going well. Take care.